On the occasion of World Mental Health Day, which was commemorated yesterday, there were reports that more than 60 million Nigerians are suffering from varying degrees of advanced mental illness. This depressing picture seems to support the view of an increasingly vocal minority for a state of emergency to be declared in the health sector. The World Mental Health Day also aims at highlighting the need for reconsideration of the generally poor public attitude towards this threatening epidemic among Nigerians. We'll shortly be getting to all of that by speaking with Dr. Sarah Uwa, a medical practitioner of over a decade of practical experience with interests spanning child health and protection, counseling, and motivational talk. We shall also be talking to Titilayo Ogubambi, a gender-based violence prevention activist. She'll be looking at issues around the International Day of the Girl Child, which has been marked all over the world today. And finally, on the program, we shall be having some time out with Olakpeju Fadirepo, producer and host of a television program, and she'll be talking about Chatroom, a gender-based film on violence against women.
We'll also be catching up on news-making headlines across the globe and review the newspapers with Arise News analyst Emmanuel Efeni, while OG Opi will be here to fill us in on what's trending around the world. It's going to be all of that and a whole lot more today on The Morning Show.
Welcome back to The Morning Show here on Arise News. It's now time to take a look at news headlines making headlines around the globe. Our top story this hour, the Nigeria government has paid the sum of £250,000 to Process and Industrial Developments Limited, PNID, as running costs, following an order of the commercial courts in London last month. Justice Christopher Butcher gave the order on September 26th with a 14-day ultimatum to the Nigerian government, a deadline that expired Thursday. Nigeria is currently battling to reverse the judgment of the London court, which awarded $9.6 billion in favor of PNID over an alleged breach of a gas supply contract agreement. The government has also appealed against the order of the same court, which asked that a $200 million security payment be made into its account within 60 days as a condition for a stay of execution of the $9.6 billion judgment after granting the country leave to appeal the judgment. The Solicitor General of the Federation, Mr. Dayo Akpata, who confirmed this on Thursday, said payment of the running cost was ordered by the court, was made pending the hearing of the appeal against the $9.6 billion judgment in favor of PNID. Right, so the £250,000 cost is not necessarily anything too alarming, though each party to any kind of legal action usually bears its own cost. There's legal fees and other disbursements, but sometimes a judge will order that one party pays the cost of the other party to make them whole, as to sort of compensate them from the hassle, really, of having to institute this process in the first case. So that's not too alarming. The really horrific part is that $200 million condition, $200 million condition for the stay of execution. I do hope we're successful in appealing that.
Absolutely, because I think that's the part that kind of dampens the entire thing completely. It's a bit of a sore on Nigeria, and I completely agree with you on that. But the other part is not too alarming, and it's good to see that things are underway in terms of the process with PNID. It's good that we're actually getting updates in the way that we are when it comes to the PNID case, because, of course, 20% of our foreign reserves is not a small amount.
It's not. That's the kind of money that's on the line. And now we've had the president present his budget. It actually just reminds us of the kind of money that we stand to lose and all that money could have been used for.
Exactly.
We can't afford that.
We cannot afford that.
Yeah. Well, still in Nigeria, the debate on the 2020 appropriation bill presented to the National Assembly on Tuesday by President Muhammadu Buhari entered day 2 yesterday at the upper chamber as senators faulted the federal government's projections of a 10.33 trillion naira budget for 2020. This is just as the Senate President, Dr. Ahmed Lawan, also at plenary Thursday, announced that debate on the budget would end next Tuesday for committee work to start by Wednesday. Senate Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Emmanuel Boacha, who was the first to speak on the general principle of the budget, wondered if proper monitoring of budget implementation had not been in place for several years. He regretted the low rate of budget implementation, saying since 1999, budget implementation had not reached 70%. That is really alarming, what he has said.
He also said there's the 2019 Appropriation Act, and we're doing this for the 2020 budget. Like, I'm reading down the report right now, and it's really alarming because he said we refuse to address this aspect of our shortcomings, right? And right now the Senate just seems as though they have no faith whatsoever in this entire
in
process.
budget implementation.
Yeah.
Well, we said this yesterday, didn't we?
Yeah.
That there has never really been realistic benchmarks, realistic projections. They tend to be really optimistic. And that is why you now find problems when it comes to implementation.
Thank you.
Where does the money come from?
Exactly.
So that, for me, the whole entire basis, whatever the budget is sort of pegged on initially from the get-go, is flawed. So this is why we have problems with budget implementation.
Exactly.
But this 70% that he's cited is really quite staggering, because it's all very well and good to have this debate and eventually approve the budget, but if it's not going to be implemented,
have not reached 70%.
yes,
so
if it's not going to be implemented, then there's really no point.
Absolutely, absolutely, because how are things going to work out in that sense? 70% is way too low. And that's a very shocking, way too high actually. That's a very, very shocking rate.
But then this is the role, I think, where civil society organizations come in and really make demands and also monitor the budget implementation and ensure, because it's one thing to pat the 9th National Assembly on the back for trying to restore our budget cycle to January to December, so we have stability there. But implementation is another. So this whole budget cycle thing is just really beside the point if we cannot get proper implementation. So I think civil society organizations and the media really have to stay on this issue to ensure that the right thing is done. I actually tried to look at the Budget Office website this morning, and it's down. If that doesn't tell you something, well, yeah, I wanted to see for myself. How successful implementation has been. And the website is down.
And you know, he was querying a lot of things in this report. He even queried the 2.3 million barrels per day estimate for crude oil as well. We spoke about that yesterday.
Based on what?
Based on what? Exactly. Because right now, no, it's quite
the
quite a
projections
situation.
are unrealistic, and this is why when it's time to implement, then the government gets stuck. There's just no money to implement.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, staying in Nigeria, the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption in Abuja says it has recovered at least 1 trillion naira, which it says has been deployed to fund the social investment program of the federal government. This is coming as President Muhammadu Buhari on Thursday disclosed that instructions had been given to relevant authorities that all forfeited assets be sold and the money put in the single treasury, single account. Briefing State House reporters after the committee met with the president, PACAC chairman, Professor Itse Sage, said 500 billion naira spent on SIP in 2017 and another 500 billion naira in 2018 were proceeds of recovered assets by the committee. According to him, whatever the committee recovers from looters is pumped back into the system, adding that corruption in Nigeria is a cancer that has eaten deep into every aspect of the country's national life. Well, yes, I do appreciate that observation by Professor Itsesage and the fact that they're plowing the money back into the social investment programs that fund school feeding and the other government
money, etc.
Interventions, so that at least it's hoped that the poorest of the poor get some kind of relief.
Exactly, and you know, even in the 2020 budget as well, there was quite a lot that was put towards social investment programs too, and it's good to see that the money is going towards the right cause. The president did come out to reiterate the other day, yesterday I believe it was, that all the money that's recovered go back into the Treasury single account, but it's good to see that they're trying to put it, no matter, okay, there are flaws with the social investment programs, as we always say, but the fact of the matter is it's going towards the right cause. So it can only be sustainable development if we look at it that way, hopefully. So that's good news. That's welcoming.
It really is, yes. Now, Nigeria's Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, says online news platforms will soon be regulated. The minister said this on Thursday in Abuja when he inaugurated a 7-man committee set up to implement reforms in the National Broadcasting Commission, NBC. Mohammed said reforms that will be implemented by the committee are recommendations approved by President Muhammadu Buhari. He said Buhari approved an amendment to the NBC Act to enable it to license web TV and radio stations, including foreign broadcasters, beaming signals into the country. According to him, the president also approved the upward review of fines from 500,000 Naira to 5 million Naira for breaches relating to hate speech and the upgrade of political comments relating to the same Class A offense in the Broadcasting Code. I'm sure this is going to raise a lot of eyebrows.
It's raised my eyebrows. This is absolutely shocking in my opinion. I do not agree with these.
Why not? You can't have unqualified, unfettered rights, can you? All rights have to be restricted.
In Nigeria, apparently that's the case. So.
Everywhere.
No, but look. Tundun, freedom of speech is being threatened by this administration in so many different ways. And this is just another addition to those threats. You already have certain sanctions in place when it comes to breaching certain things and crossing certain lines, such as hate speech. But does it take us going this far to the point where we're really trying to continue this push in on media houses and controlling journalists?
I predicted your reaction, Laila.
I know you did.
I absolutely did. But I will say that it's a difficult one. The issue that you've highlighted is correct because you cannot dismiss the lack of trust that this administration has created. Exactly. This might have been announced by another administration and nobody would have batted an eyelid. But because this administration has had the issues that we're still having with people like Shawara, you know, criticizing the government is now perceived as treason. So we don't trust their rather subjective definition of hate speech. Hate speech on its own is quite clear. The meaning of hate speech is sort of abusive or threatening language towards like a particular race or tribe or sexual orientation. But we've seen with this government, they're quite prickly, they're quite sensitive. So they could really extend that definition of hate speech so that everybody ends up effectively gagged. But on the other hand, we cannot have unfettered rights because we have seen that hate speech has resulted in loss of lives.
Absolutely,
hate
I
speech
agree with you.
Gets people killed, actually. So we do have to have some kind of control. Absolutely. This is just what it boils down to. Trust, once again. When we feel that our government has abused their position, has abused their power, we don't trust them.
But we already have laws in place for hate speech. That's my point.
No, but they're trying to extend it to make it stronger from 500,000 to 5 million.
But do you think that's coming at the right time, and do you think that's the right move?
I have no problem with trying to control hate speech because it does get people killed. My worry is the definition, the subjective application of that phrase. That's my worry.
Me too.
Hate speech is not language that's critical of the government. We're in a democracy. We have won the right to criticize the government.
Meanwhile, that is what is being perceived as.
So that's my issue.
Exactly.
How will be defined. But hate speech, trying to punish hate speech in and of itself is not a bad thing.
No, it's not at all. It's actually a good thing because, like you said, people get killed because of hate speech, and it's something that has to be controlled. It's that free line, or that very thin line, rather, between freedom of expression and absolute hate. There's no other way to put it, and you should be punished for hate. I completely agree with you on that. But trust.
Yes. You're right. You have to trust the regulators. That's really the bottom line.
And that's a bit of a problem.
It is. We'll take a short break now, and we'll be back with more news headlines. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still on the news headlines. Over to Turkey, where they've stepped up in their ground and air offensive against Kurdish militia in northern Syria, forcing thousands to flee. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that so far more than 100 terrorists had been killed in the fighting, although casualty reports from the area did not support his claim. Meanwhile, Turkish officials say that 2 children and their mother have been killed by incoming mortar fire from Kurdish-held positions. However, around the globe, world leaders and dignitaries are calling for urgent action on the current situation. Many Republicans in the United States are pressing President Trump to impose sanctions on Turkey, while French President Emmanuel Macron has strongly condemned the action. Let's take a look.
I strongly condemn the unilateral military offensive currently underway in Syria, and I call on Turkey to put an end to it as soon as possible. Today, Turkey is forgetting that the priority for Syria for the international community is the fight against Daesh, and terrorism is spreading a humanitarian risk to millions of people. And this risk, the risk of helping Daesh rebuild a caliphate, this humanitarian risk, Turkey is taking it solely.
This absolutely horrific overturn that's taken place in the past 2 days. How do you take this situation?
It's a mess. I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody is condemning Erdogan, and Erdogan's response is the most worrying of all. He's so defiant, and he said that if the EU continues to criticize him over this move, he will let 3.6 Syrian refugees into Europe because he's holding them in Turkey. And Donald Trump's position in this as well is pretty shameful. The fact that he withdrew U.S. troops and effectively hung the Kurds out to dry after such a close alliance is really awful.
It is.
And being so dismissive, oh, the Kurds didn't help us during Normandy, and the Kurds and the Turks are natural enemies. What is a natural enemy?
What is a natural
Who says
enemy?
that? It's a very complicated issue because basically what it is something even Nigeria, every country can actually learn from this disaster. This is about Turkey not respecting the rights of minorities.
Exactly.
That about 80% of Turkey is Turkish, and you have a minority Kurdish and other population. And there's always been conflict, there's always been tension, there's been terrorist attacks from Kurdish nationalists in Turkey. And there have been attempts by the Kurds to secede. They want their own independent Kurdish state.
Yeah.
So that is the backdrop behind all of this and why Trump is dismissing this as, oh, these are natural enemies.
As
but
he
to say
usually
that,
does to minorities.
To say that is as if there's no way of resolution. There always is. And even apart from that, even if they have had this long enmity between them, overtures were made recently. There was quite successful peace talks with even the head of the Kurdish separatist group encouraging Kurdish people to get involved in Turkey's elections to favor Erdogan, actually. It was looking quite good at some point, and all of a sudden we now have this total escalation. And you now have news that ISIS wives, the fighters that have been captured by the Kurds, their wives are rejoicing. You see, anything you've done that makes the wives of captured ISIS fighters rejoice, you know you're making a mistake.
Exactly.
Because they know their husbands are about to be released and that ISIS is about to start all over again. This is a disaster. An absolute disaster. And we know what ISIS did in this world. There's no need to even go back and rehash all of that. And we know how long it took to contain ISIS and defeat ISIS. So take your finger off the button right now is a huge disaster. I don't know
what Trump's game plan.
Mistake.
I don't know what his game plan could have possibly have been, because he always has a game plan, even though it seems like he doesn't. And of course, it's the elections, right? And however he thinks this is going to play off, he's gotten it completely wrong and twisted. It's an absolute mess.
I mean, somebody like Lindsey Graham, who's frankly his biggest fan, publicly, is even criticizing Trump over this. And with the election, what I mean is that it's been a campaign promise of his to take America out of all their wars, which is fine. I completely understand that America, I agree with him. America had no business in the Middle East in the first case.
Thank you.
But there's a manner in which you de-escalate. This is very sudden, it's very abrupt. And you leave a vacuum. You cannot leave a vacuum.
Exactly.
It's actually really worrying.
There's a reason why there's a process to taking troops out of a particular area. There's a reason why even as the Democrats are now campaigning and they're going around and they're being asked if they're going to withdraw troops, they're not saying, I'm going to do it immediately, because it's not something you just do abruptly. And of course, Trump being Trump, he just had to do that.
I truly am very worried.
Still on Trump, he has used a campaign rally to blast the impeachment inquiry against him as a brazen attempt by Democrats to overthrow him, vowing that the attempt to remove him from office would backfire. Now, supporters of the Republican president packed the 20,000-seat Target Center in Minneapolis for the first of 3 campaign rallies scheduled for the next week, with stops in Louisiana tomorrow and in Dallas in a week. Now, Trump said that the impeachment drama will drive up his support ahead of the November 2020 elections and also help him to re-win his elections or get another re-election for another 4-year term. Let's look.
Our bold pursuit of this pro-American agenda has enraged, and you know what's happened? It's enraged the failed ruling class in Washington. Not easy to get them out, but we're doing it slowly but surely. These corrupt politicians and the radical leftists got rich bleeding America dry, and they knew that my election would finally end their pillaging and looting of our country. And that's what they were doing. And that's what they continue to try and do. That is why from day one, the wretched Washington swamp has been trying to nullify the results of a truly great and democratic election, the election of 2016. They're trying. They're not getting very far. These are bad people. My phone call, as an example, with the president of Ukraine was perfect. Everybody that looked at it. And the only reason I released it was that the Democrats put out a phony narrative. So I had no choice. And I don't want to do that as president. Every time a president from a country calls me or I call them, we have to release the text. How can you do business that way? Who's going to want to speak to your president? So the president of Ukraine reiterated today at a major news conference on other subjects that he was under absolutely no pressure. He doesn't even know what they're talking about. And he used the word, there was no blackmail during this call. Nancy Pelosi said a day before seeing the transcript of the call with the Ukrainian president, we've got to impeach him. We've got to impeach him. Right? And then she saw the call and she said to her people, what the hell? Nobody ever told me this was the call. But she keeps going anyway because the press is fake and they play right into their hands.
Well, his speech here, apparently, I'm looking at Ilan Omar's page right now. She goes, at his rally, Trump called me an American-hating socialist and a disgrace. What is wrong with him?
I don't understand it. Why the abuse and blatant lies?
Yeah.
We just heard just a litany of lies.
Yeah.
What is, and you know that the Zelensky denial, what else is Zelensky going to say?
Thank you.
He's president of Ukraine. He has been told you will not get U.S. aid if you don't play ball. And what else is he going to say? The man has been exhausted. They've taken the aid hostage.
Yeah.
Until he
literally.
Biden and his son Hunter. So what else is he going to say? First he's going to say that, oh, no, the phone call was all very well and good. But we have a transcript. Even apart from the transcript, Trump himself admitted what he did.
So I don't know.
Trump then went on international TV, actually, because the world's press follows President Trump, and said, Ukraine, investigate Biden. China, investigate Biden. So what on earth is he saying?
I have no idea whatsoever.
And especially when hours ago, just hours ago, Rudy Giuliani, his lawyer, two of his associates who were helping in this disastrous Ukrainian attempt to investigate Biden have been arrested for campaign finance violations. That was a matter of hours ago.
Thank you. So I have no idea. Once again, like I said, I do not understand Trump's game plan. I don't understand.
No, but I
where
do.
He's at. Yeah.
He sees nothing wrong with soliciting foreign help to win an election.
And I don't see how he expects some sort of well and good conversation to be some sort of symbol for anything good here. You still came out yourself to admit, basically, to what went on. You have committed impeachable offences, and that is just facts of the matter.
He said it with his own mouth. This is what I don't understand.
Are behind bars.
Two people just got arrested a matter of hours ago.
What else does he want here? I have no idea what he's doing.
And he's pointing the finger and talking about a swamp that needs to be drained.
Meanwhile, back at the ranch. Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar said that he is now absolutely convinced that the UK wants a Brexit deal. Now, this is possible by the 31st of October, as we know to be the deadline, following talks with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The Prime Minister and his Irish counterpart met in the UK yesterday for what their offices had billed as a private meeting ahead of next week's summit of EU leaders in Brussels. Speaking after their talks, Mr. Varadkar refused to give details of their meeting or what proposals were being discussed, but offered an upbeat assessment on the situation. The news caused a surge in the pound. Now, back to Brexit and back to the situation. So they're in talks, at least. What's your take?
I am optimistic, like a lot of other people are, that finally a deal might be in the offing, especially because no details have been released. That, for me, is the clearest sign. Because usually, right off the bat, details are revealed. They're immediately shot down in flames. But the fact that everything has been kept under wraps, it shows real seriousness this time. They actually want to get it over the bar, finally.
Yeah, finally, and hopefully they do. 31st of October is now how far away? It's the 11th of October. We have not got time at all.
Yes.
And lastly, on to Hong Kong. All of the stations of Hong Kong's metro operator are now open for the first time in a week, ahead of another round of anti-government protests this weekend. Also, the city's legislature began its first session since protesters stormed the building in July. Now, pro-establishment and democratic lawmakers too shouted at each other before the start of the session, heightening tensions that have been spiraled following 4 months of often violent pro-democracy protests in the Asian financial hub. Some lawmakers wore black masks as they sat in the chamber, with others carrying placards reading, and I quote, "Police brutality still exists. How can we have a meeting?" The wearing of face masks was banned under a colonial era emergency powers invoked by embattled Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam a week ago. So there are push and pulls going on in the chamber, but what is your take on this?
I'm actually surprised that we're actually seeing this division, a public division,
Yeah.
because you'll recall what Carrie Lam did.
The government
she made
is all...
everybody stand behind her, yes, with the passage of that bill. But I guess now people just can't hack it.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Carrie Lam, Carrie Lam. That is all on the news headline.